house, I immediately noticed it, the car. A sleek black sedan parked right in my spot. My spot. At first I thought maybe Sarah had friends over, but the house was too still. No lights on downstairs, no laughter echoing through the windows. Something gnawed at my gut, a familiar unsettling feeling that had been with me for months. I sat in the car for a moment, letting the engine idle as I stared at the unfamiliar vehicle. The shadows from the streetlights made its polished surface gleam like a predator waiting to strike. I killed the engine and got out, my breath forming small clouds in the crisp night air. My footsteps were deliberate, slow, as I approached the front door. I had been on edge for a while now, noticing little things, Sarah's sudden late nights, her distant behavior, and the lingering scent of cologne that wasn't mine on her clothes. I twisted the doorknob and entered the house, the weight of the day's travel falling away under the cold. Hard reality of what I was about to face. I stepped inside, shutting the door behind me as quietly as possible. The house was dark except for a faint glow from upstairs, the kind of glow that only came from our bedroom. My chest tightened as I listened carefully, trying to make sense of the muffled noises that reached me. There was a rhythm to it, faint but unmistakable. Sarah, and someone else. The anger that had been simmering inside me for weeks now bubbled up, but I forced myself to stay calm. Exploding wasn't going to do me any good. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. The betrayal stung more than I imagined it would. I had been mentally preparing for this moment, yet the reality of it hit like a punch to the gut. Each step I took up the stairs felt heavier than the last, the wooden floor creaking beneath me as if it were trying to warn them. I paused outside our bedroom door, my hand hovering over the handle. A part of me wanted to burst in, to catch them in the act, but I needed to stay in control. This moment wasn't about them. It was about me. Slowly, I pushed the door open, and there they were. Sarah, with her back to me, tangled in the sheets with a man I didn't recognize. John, I'd later learn, though at that moment his name didn't matter. Nothing about him mattered, really. Just another shadow in a story I never thought I'd be part of. For a split second, I stood there, taking it all in. The reality of the scene was far worse than I had imagined. My wife, the woman I had trusted with everything, wrapped around another man like I had ceased to exist. The soft moan escaping her lips was a dagger, twisting in a place I didn't know could hurt this much. But I didn't flinch, didn't say a word. I had rehearsed this in my mind, thought about how I'd handle it, and now was the moment of execution. With a cold smirk, I cleared my throat. The sound cut through the room like a shot. Sarah froze. John jolted up, wide-eyed and scrambling for the sheets like a guilty schoolboy caught doing something stupid. "Don't mind me," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "I just came home a little early. Thought I'd surprise you." Sarah turned to face me, her face drained of color as the realization sank in. "Alex," she stammered, her eyes wide with panic. She fumbled for the sheets, trying to cover herself, but there was no covering this. The damage was done. I held up a hand, cutting off whatever excuse she was about to spill. "Save it. I'm not here for conversation." From the inside of my coat, I pulled out a folder and tossed it onto the bed. It landed right between them, the crisp sound of paper on fabric filling the awkward silence. Divorce papers. Her name, my name, and everything she'd worked so hard to keep hidden from me now spelled out in cold, legal terms. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The look of shock and confusion on her face was almost laughable. She hadn't expected this, not from me. Sarah always thought I'd be too blind to figure it out, too weak to confront her. But here we were. "You've been busy," I said calmly, my lips curling into a smile that held no warmth. "But so have I." I turned and walked out of the room, leaving them both frozen in their shame. As I walked down the stairs, I could still hear Sarah's voice from the bedroom. It wasn't loud or angry, just a frantic, pathetic whisper trying to make sense of what had just happened. I didn't care to listen. The door was already closing on this chapter of my life. Every step I took away from that room felt lighter, like I was shedding the weight of years of lies. So once I reached the living room, I stopped for a moment. The memories here, scattered across the furniture and walls, seemed foreign now. The framed photos on the mantel, our wedding day, vacations, holidays with family all looked like relics from the life that no longer belonged to me. Everything in this house was tainted, and I knew I wouldn't be coming back. I didn't rush. I wasn't the one who needed to scramble for explanations or excuses. That was Sarah's job now. She would be left to pick up the pieces of whatever this was, but it wouldn't involve me anymore. I heard footsteps behind me. Sarah had thrown on a robe and was coming down the stairs. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with desperation. I knew that look well, the look of someone who suddenly realizes that their world is falling apart. "Alex, please," she started, her voice cracking. "It's not what you think. Let me explain." Her words felt empty, hollow, like they were more for her own benefit than for mine. Maybe she thought she could still salvage something. Maybe she believed I'd give her a chance to twist the narrative, to make me doubt what I'd seen with my own eyes. I turned slowly, meeting her gaze with an icy calm. "You think you need to explain?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Sarah, I'm not blind. I've seen enough, heard enough." My voice was steady, controlled, though inside I felt a quiet storm brewing, one I refused to let loose in front of her. Her lip trembled, and she took a step closer as if physical proximity would somehow undo the reality of the situation. "It was a mistake. I never wanted it to be like this," she said, almost pleading now. "You have to understand, we've been distant, and I didn't know how to fix things." I let out a short, bitter laugh. "So you fixed it by screwing some guy while I was away on business?" The sarcasm in my voice was razor sharp, and I saw her flinch. But there was no apology in her eyes, only fear of losing everything she thought she could get away with. Sarah reached out, trying to touch my arm, but I pulled back. The physical distance between us felt symbolic now. I wasn't hers anymore, and she wasn't mine. We had crossed a line that could never be redrawn. "Alex, I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It was a stupid mistake. I didn't mean to hurt you. We can fix this." "Fix this?" I repeated, shaking my head. "There's nothing left to fix, Sarah. You made your choice. And now your choice." I gestured toward the stairs, "and him? He gets to live with it, too." The silence that followed was deafening. I saw her searching for words, grasping for anything that might pull her out of the hole she had dug herself into. But there was nothing. I had already given her all the chances in the world, and she had squandered them. "I'll be in touch with my lawyer," I said flatly, turning toward the door. "We're done here." Before she could say anything else, I walked out, leaving her standing in the hallway alone, just like she deserved. I stepped outside into the cool night air, feeling the weight of finality with every breath. The silence was comforting after the chaos of the last few minutes. The front door closed softly behind me, and for a moment I stood there on the porch, staring at the black sedan still parked in my spot. John's car. The audacity of it all was almost amusing now. This stranger thought he could just slide into my life, into my house, my bed, as if I wouldn't notice. A bitter smirk tugged at my lips as I walked toward the car. I paused beside it, letting my fingers trail along the smooth surface. Part of me wanted to do something reckless, key the sides, slash the tires, leave some kind of lasting mark. But no, that would be giving them too much. I wasn't about to stoop to their level. Besides, the real damage had already been done inside. What could a scratch or two compare to the emotional wreckage Sarah was about to face? I turned away from the car, heading to my own parked a few feet away. The sound of the front door creaking open behind me stopped me in my tracks. I didn't need to turn around to know it was Sarah. Her footsteps were soft but hurried as she came closer, desperation clear in the way she called my name. "Alex, wait," she pleaded. Her voice was hoarse, almost raw from whatever emotions were running wild inside her. I kept my back to her, my fingers tightening around the car keys in my hand. "There's nothing left to say, Sarah," I muttered, my tone cold and final. But she didn't stop. "Please," she whispered, stepping into my line of sight. Her face was a mess of tears, her eyes puffy and red. I can fix this, I swear. Just don't leave like this." I finally turned to face her, really looking at her for the first time since I caught her. It was strange. The woman standing in front of me looked like my wife, the woman I had spent years building a life with, but she felt like a stranger. And whatever connection we once had was severed, and no amount of tears or apologies could change that. "Fix this?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "How, Sarah? How do you fix this?" "You can't undo what you've done." She opened her mouth to respond, but the words caught in her throat. She looked down, her hands trembling as she wrung them together. "I made a mistake," she croaked. "I wasn't thinking. I was lonely. And you've been so distant, and—" "Don't," I cut her off, raising a hand. "Don't try to pin this on me. Don't act like this is about us being distant, or whatever excuse you cooked up to justify what you did." My voice was sharp, cutting through her weak explanations like a blade. "You made a choice, Sarah. This wasn't some accident. You chose him." Tears flowed freely down her cheeks now, and she took a step closer, her hands reaching out as if she could somehow hold on to the life slipping away. "Alex, please," she begged. "We can work through this. I'll do whatever it takes. Just don't leave me. I love you." I looked into her eyes, searching for any hint of the woman I once loved, but all I saw was the same selfishness that led us here. She didn't love me. She loved the comfort, the security, the idea of me. But love, real love, that had died the moment she let him into our bed. I don't think you know what love is anymore, I said quietly. And honestly, I don't care. So with that, I opened my car door, got inside, and started the engine. Sarah stood there sobbing, but I didn't spare her another glance as I pulled out of the driveway. Whatever we had was gone, and I wasn't looking back. I drove for what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes. The road stretched out in front of me, endless and dark, mirroring the pit in my stomach. My mind raced, replaying the events over and over, as if trying to make sense of them. But there was no making sense of betrayal. It was a wound that cut too deep, the kind of pain that sat in your chest and made it hard to breathe. I wasn't even sure where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay there, couldn't stay in that house with her, with the suffocating memories of what used to be. My grip tightened on the steering wheel as I pushed the car faster, needing to outrun the thoughts, the anger, the sadness. Eventually, I found myself pulling into the parking lot of a small motel on the edge of town. The neon sign flickered in the night, casting an eerie glow over the empty lot. It was the kind of place where people came to disappear, to be anonymous. That's exactly what I needed right now, an escape from the chaos my life had just become. I parked the car and sat there for a moment, staring at the motel's dingy exterior. The reality of what had happened was starting to sink in. I had just walked out on my wife, walked out on my marriage. After years of building a life together, it was all crumbling down around me, and there was no salvaging it. With a deep sigh, I grabbed my bag from the back seat and headed inside. The lobby was just as bleak as the outside, with faded wallpaper and a bored-looking clerk sitting behind the desk. He barely glanced at me as I approached, his eyes glued to a small TV playing some late-night rerun. "One room, please," I said, my voice rougher than I expected. The clerk nodded and slid a key across the counter without a word. I grabbed it and headed to my room, not even bothering to take in the surroundings. All I wanted was to be alone. Alone with my thoughts, as terrifying as that sounded. The room was small and outdated, with a worn-out bed and a flickering lamp in the corner. But it was quiet, and right now, that's all I needed. I tossed my bag on the floor and collapsed onto the bed, staring up at the ceiling. My mind wouldn't stop racing, bouncing between the images of Sarah in bed with John and the sound of her pleading voice, begging me not to leave. It wasn't anger that filled me now. It was exhaustion. Emotional exhaustion from years of trying, from holding on a marriage that had already been dead long before tonight. Maybe that was the hardest part, to admit that I'd seen the signs. I'd felt the distance growing, but I had been too afraid to confront it, too afraid to acknowledge that the woman I had loved was no longer the same person. I turned onto my side, staring at the blinking red numbers on the clock. Time moved slowly, each second a reminder that this nightmare was far from over. Tomorrow I would have to deal with the fallout lawyers, the division of assets, the painful unraveling of everything we had once built together. But tonight I didn't have to deal with any of that. Tonight I could just lie here and pretend for a few more hours that none of it was real. I closed my eyes, but sleep didn't come. How could it when everything I knew had been ripped apart? All I could do was lie there, trapped in the endless loop of questions that had no answers. I woke up the next morning in the same position I had fallen asleep and staring blankly at the ceiling, the weight of reality pressing down on me like a heavy fog. The room was dim, lit only by a sliver of sunlight creeping in through the old faded curtains. My head ached, not from alcohol, but from the sheer emotional exhaustion of the night before. Sitting up slowly, I rubbed my eyes, trying to shake off the hollow feeling inside. It was like waking up in someone else's life, a life I didn't recognize. I used to have a routine wake up next to Sarah, grab coffee together before heading to work. Normal conversations about the day ahead. Now, all that felt like it belonged to another world. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, snapping me out of my thoughts. I glanced at it, half expecting it to be Sarah, trying once again to explain, to plead. But it wasn't her. Instead, it was a text from my lawyer confirming that the divorce papers had been served. I let out a long breath, staring at the message. It was official now. Sarah had the papers, and there was no going back. Not that I wanted to. What was left to save? I had seen her with him, seen them together in our bed. No amount of apologies or explanations could erase that image from my mind. Still, a part of me felt empty, like I had lost something vital. Maybe it was the years we spent together. Or Maybe it was the betrayal itself, how easily she had thrown it all away. I couldn't tell anymore. All I knew was that my life had just taken a sharp, irreversible turn, and there was no undoing it. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, staring down at the floor. The motel room felt suffocating, too small to contain everything swirling inside me. I needed air, needed to get out of here, away from the walls that seemed to close in with every passing second. Grabbing my jacket, I left the room and stepped outside. The cool morning breeze hit me, bringing with it a sense of temporary relief. I walked aimlessly through the parking lot, my mind racing with fragmented thoughts. What was I supposed to do now? Where was I supposed to go? I hadn't planned this far. Last night had been about escaping Sarah, escaping the image of her with that man. But now I had to face the aftermath, the mess left behind. My thoughts drifted back to Sarah. Was she still with him? Had he left after I walked out? Did they even care about what they'd done, about the wreckage they'd caused? A bitter taste rose in my mouth as I thought of John, the stranger who had slipped into my life like a thief, stealing everything I held dear. And Sarah, how could she just stand there pleading? After all the lies? I shook my head, trying to clear it. There was no point in dwelling on the questions that would never have satisfying answers. The only thing I knew for sure was that I couldn't stay in this place physically or emotionally. Walking back to my car, I sat in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel. I had a choice to make. I could let this betrayal consume me, let it dictate the rest of my life. Or I could take control, rebuild something out of the ashes. But first I needed to drive. To anywhere but here. I needed distance from the motel, from Sarah, from the life I had thought was mine. I turned the key in the ignition and pulled out of the parking lot, the road stretching ahead of me once again. Only this time I wasn't running from something. I was moving toward whatever came next. The miles blurred as I drove, the road stretching endlessly ahead of me, empty and quiet, like my mind was trying to be. I wasn't sure where I was going, but it didn't matter. Anywhere was better than the motel, or worse, the house I once called home. That place felt like a graveyard now, full of memories that had been poisoned, tainted by betrayal. The further I got from it, the more I could breathe. The morning sun had risen higher now, warming the world around me, but inside I still felt cold. The numbness was starting to wear off, though, and in its place, a slow burn of anger was beginning to settle. Not the kind of anger that flares up and disappears. No, this was quiet kind. The kind that simmers under the surface, waiting for a release. My mind drifted back to Sarah and the scene in the bedroom. How she had looked at me with those wide, panicked eyes, trying to claw her way out of the mess she had created. It was almost pathetic. She hadn't even tried to deny it, just fumbled for excuses, like it could all be explained away with a few well-placed words. And John, I barely remembered his face. He had been nothing more than a blur of fear and shame, scrambling to hide under the covers like a coward. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles turning white. How could she do it? After all these years, after everything we had built together, how could she throw it all away for some meaningless fling? We had our problems, sure. Every marriage does. But I thought we were stronger than that. I thought we had something worth fighting for. Clearly I was wrong. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. I had been such a fool, blind to what was happening right under my nose. Maybe deep down I had known for a while. Maybe the signs had been there all along, and I just didn't want to see them. The late nights, the sudden distance, the vague explanations for where she'd been. It was all so obvious now, but at the time I had convinced myself that it was just a rough patch, that we would get through it. I was still stewing in those thoughts when my phone rang, jolting me out of my spiral. I glanced at the screen. It was Mike, my lawyer, probably calling to check if I'd seen his message about the divorce papers. I didn't want to talk about it, not yet, but I knew I couldn't avoid it forever. With a sigh, I answered. Alex, his voice came through the speaker, calm and professional as always. I just wanted to confirm that the papers were delivered to Sarah this morning. I haven't heard anything back yet, but I assume she'll reach out soon enough. Yeah, thanks, Mike, I replied, my voice sounding flat even to me. I appreciate it. He paused, sensing the heaviness in my tone. How are you holding up? I leaned back in my seat, staring at the open road. I don't know, I admitted. It feels like everything's falling apart, and I can't do a damn thing about it. Mike was silent for a moment before speaking again. Look, I know this is hard, but you're doing the right thing. Don't let her manipulate you into thinking otherwise. The papers are filed. This process is in motion, and you've got to focus on what comes next. What comes next? Those words echoed in my mind long after I hung up the phone. What did come next? A life without Sarah, without the home we shared, without the future I thought we were building together. I had no answers, but I did know one thing: whatever came next, it wouldn't include her. As I kept driving, I felt a strange sense of clarity wash over me. The anger was still there, but now it was sharper, more focused. I had been wrong to think I couldn't do anything about this. I could. I was already taking the first steps. This was my life, and I was the one in control of what happened next. The road ahead was uncertain, but at least it was mine. I kept driving, the landscape shifting from city streets to open highways, and finally to the familiar stretch of road that led to the beach house. I hadn't planned on coming here, but somehow it felt like the only place left that made sense. The house had always been my sanctuary, a place where the noise of life couldn't reach me. It seemed fitting to end up here now in the aftermath of everything. As I pulled into the gravel driveway, I turned off the engine and sat in silence for a moment, staring at the waves crashing in the distance. The rhythmic sound of the ocean had always been calming, but today it felt like something more, like a reminder that life keeps moving, no matter how hard the storm hits. I got out of the car and walked toward the house, the familiar creak of the wooden steps under my feet bringing a strange sense of comfort. Everything was as we'd left it the last time we were here, Sarah's book still on the table, her beach hat hanging by the door. I didn't feel the sharp stab of pain I expected. Instead, I felt nothing, just a quiet acceptance. I sat down on the porch, watching the waves roll in, let the silence wash over me. The storm that had raged inside me for the past 24 hours was finally beginning to settle. Sarah's chapter in my life was over, but my story wasn't. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time that didn't scare me. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, I allowed myself to breathe. I was still here, and that was enough.